Iowa was number 7 in my pass defense rankings in 2017. Wow, we went all the way back to 2017. Then number 24, number 19, 10, and 2 the next 4 years. In 2022, they were my number 7 rated secondary preseason, and they finished at number 8, 13 TDs, 15 interceptions. In 2023, I had them rated as the 6th best secondary, and they finished number 7. Only gave up 56% completion percentage, 11 TDs, and 10 interceptions. Last year, they had 3 starters back and improved their streak of pick 6 TDs to 17 straight years. But the unit gave up some big plays and dropped to number 32. 20 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and 62% completion percentage. This year, they lose free safety Quinn Schulte, 13 starts, 3rd leading tackler, and 3 interceptions, and quarterback Jamari Harris, who opted out the last 3 games after 10 starts. TJ Hall missed some time last year with an injury, making 7 starts, and maybe the top guy, safety Xavier Wampa, and cornerback Deshaun Lee highlight a unit that should take a stock market leap in my pass defense ratings.
So where did he have them last year? Because they ended up 32nd overall in the secondary.
It must have. He had them at number 32. No, they dropped to number 32 in his ratings. I don't know what they were preseason.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious because it sounded he was putting out his projections and how they compared to end results for the previous years.
Yeah.
So my guess is he had them pretty high, and then they fell to 32nd, which would make sense. They brought back Harris and Wampa and Schulte and Castro.
They were number 5 preseason.
Wow. Okay,
no, I'm sorry. That's a special teams ranking. I don't know. He didn't, for some reason, didn't address that for that season.
Okay. Well, my guess is he did have them inside his top 10 to 15 would be my guess with all that returning production. They underperformed.
I got the 2024 Phil Steele right underneath the 2025. I'll tell you here in just a second.
Yeah. They didn't give up a lot of explosive plays. I don't know. I'm surprised. I mean, they gave up some, but they were still pretty good. And we talked to Don Patterson about this a couple weeks ago.
Well, I will tell you that in terms of individual defensive positions last year, because I can't find, he didn't have it in his synopsis about where he ranked them, unless I can find it somewhere else. There's just so much information in this thing. But the defensive line, he believed going into last year was, if I can find them, number 13 in the country. And the linebackers were number 1 in the country. And the defensive backs
finished 32nd. DBs finished 32nd.
Well, I don't know if that's the same. Oh, number 5. Defensive backs number 5. So the 3 levels of defense, 13, 1, and 5 nationally.
But they fell to 32nd by the end.
That's their pass defense rating. Those are 2 different things.
Okay, so he's not like comparing results with what he predicted. It's not like he's...
Well, I was reading a synopsis where it wasn't like a list. And
Sure.
he filled in some things and other things he left out. So I don't know.
Well, I will say this. I brought this up last night, and I was losing in total on defense 8 of their 11 starters. So that means 8 quote-unquote new starters. Now, that being said, Zach Lutmer's played a lot of football. Cohen and Tranger has played a lot of football. Bryce Hawthorne played a lot of football at South Dakota State last year. Jonah Pace played a lot. Like, they have guys who have played plenty of football. Same with Max Llewellyn. Herkett's back. Graves is back. Those are big foundational pieces on defense. The defensive line is going to be a strength. We've talked about that. Secondary, I think in general, is, and fair enough, people's biggest concern, specifically at corner, because they did struggle against the likes of Aiden Childs and the Washington quarterback whose name always escapes me. Who is that, Mark?
Will Rogers.
Will Rogers. I could have said Will, but for some reason I was going to say some other name. But yes, Will Rogers. They struggled in the secondary. They struggled in the secondary at times against Iowa State. That's kind of what ended up burning them in that game in Kinnick, giving up a big play or two, and that was all she wrote for that one. So Iowa's predicated on keeping everything in front of them. I think there will be room, especially if they deal with injuries, and corner seems to be a position where Iowa inherently is hurt often. There are going to be opportunities for teams like an Iowa State, although they're losing quite a bit of receiver production in Knoll and Higgins. There will be an opportunity for some of these opponents on the schedule, Iowa State, USC, Penn State, Oregon, right? Some of those teams that I think of that probably have pretty good wideout talent and a quarterback that can get the ball downfield to expose and exploit. But at the same time, if they stay healthy, Mark, I expect Deshaun Lee, TJ Hall, Jalen Watson, whoever plays, to be much improved, right? So you lose Jamari Harris on the back end at corner, but you get the other two guys who played a lot last year, plus an improving Jalen Watson. So I think some people expect Iowa's going to have the same Deshaun Lee and TJ Hall they had last year. And we forget that they're being coached by the best DBs coach in the country in Phil Parker. So I would expect those guys to improve mightily. By all accounts, TJ Hall's had a great offseason. He's been dealing with some injuries during camp, but I expect him to be healthy. I haven't heard anything other than reason to be optimistic there. If they get hurt, though, I just don't know who's the guy after Shaheed Barrows. And he's the guy I'm not forgetting about him, but it's just like I didn't see a lot of kids day that made me ooh and ah. Maybe he'll end up being one of the top two guys, or at least top three guys, or top four. And they really needed him. That was a big late add. I believe he was the last guy they added in the transfer portal, even after Bryce George, I believe. They needed that as far as depth. So because they deal with so many injuries at corner, depth is a concern, especially when they weren't good last year past Jamari Harris. So it's a concern, but I also think defensive line will help. The hope has to be, Mark, that Iowa's going to be able to put enough pressure on the opposing quarterback to really limit the opportunities for a Drew Aller and, a Rocco Becht to take advantage of maybe a subpar pair of corners. And I also think what's going to help those corners is having a pair of safeties that are really good, really seasoned, although Cohen Entringer hasn't started. He's played a lot of football. Xavier Wampa sounds like he's really fit into that free safety spot since he switched over to the other safety position. So, to an extent, I think I'm looking at it more glass half full. But I guess the reason why, what I would bank on is what they look like up front, what they look like on the far back end at safety, and then who's coaching that unit as a whole in Phil Parker. And maybe we see a few more blitzes this year, but I don't know that they'll need to. I think this may be the best defensive line as far as pressuring the quarterback that we've seen in at least the last 5 to 6 years.
Are you pretty certain that trotting out onto the field against Albany, you're going to see the 4 defensive backs that you're expecting to see as the starters?
No, I'm not convinced of that. I'm convinced that it's going to be Xavier Wampa and Cohen Entringer. And by the way, if one of those guys goes down, I have questions about depth after those two as well. So I don't know. This is an Iowa team. So depth at certain positions is a question mark. I don't think depth is much of a question mark as at running back. I don't think it's a question at receiver. I don't think it's a question anymore on the defensive line. And part of that's because of what they've done in the transfer portal. Where I think it is a question is at linebacker, at safety, at corner. You could argue quarterback just because I do think there's a significant drop-off from Gronowski to Brown, but it's not as severe of a drop-off as we've seen in past years, and they're better at the top, so I'm less concerned about the room in general. And then tight end, I think they're pretty sound as far as good depth. They're 3 or 4 deep right now. So, yeah, I'm confident it's going to be Xavier Wampa and Cohen Entringer if healthy, and I'm not sure. I think TJ Hall's got one of the spots. By everything I've heard, unless this injury that he dealt with and the time he missed during fall camp has set him behind the 8 ball and somebody's just latched onto it, I think he's one of the starters. And then I think that other spot is probably at this point, based on what we saw at Kids Day and just things I've heard, from within the program over the last few weeks, it's a 3-guy competition between Deshaun Lee, Jalen Watson, and Shaheed Barros. And maybe a Rashad Godfrey or an Alex Moda work in there, or maybe it's a true freshman that emerges. We've seen guys like Alante Dean or CJ Bell in the past as true freshmen work their way into competition and earn their way through special teams through camp, and then injuries happen and they're ready to go. That would be a really nice addition as well, because they brought in some good prospects. But depth has to be a concern, especially at corner, because it's where they've dealt with injuries, it seems like, the most.
We're about 8 minutes away from the Big Ten Live show with Corey and myself, just switching channels. So follow us on over, and you can give us a call as well.